my name is Savannah, and I absolutely love coming to RISE360. It is one of my favorite networking events out there. It's very laid back and informative and educational, and I always leave with a new perspective on real estate.
Daruni, I'm an investor since 2018. I've been participating in this meeting for the past 6 months. I love the atmosphere. I love the organizers here.
What's your favorite thing about it?
Meeting the people and then networking, sharing information.
I'm Sean. I drove from Sacramento. I don't miss this specific meetup because I meet many great people from real estate investors to real estate operators. That's where I met Ricky. And since last month, I've been in contact and making great progress on the assisted living, like the senior housing sector as well.
I'm local. I live in Walnut Creek. But the one thing that keeps me coming is like the high quality conversations you guys have here. There's people in every profession and every industry. They're all experts. And just vibing and understanding where they come from with their perspectives and how we can all align for the same goal. That's what keeps me coming.
So coming out to the meetup, it's fun. You get to meet people, they have some food, and you get to learn.
They told me to be quick, and I get excited and passionate. I'm going to try to control myself. All right, you guys all are familiar with the term CRE. Can anyone tell me another definition, a very important CRE that impacts your business? Anyone?
C2L.
Excuse me?
C2L.
Okay. All right. Another, the acronym CRE stands for something else that's very important right now to all of you. Anybody? All right. All right. Wow, I just put my clicker away. Let's do this. Capital rotation event. We see it every so often where liquidity shifts dramatically, like water does. Water finds crevices, and gravity pushes it down through those crevices. And when those crevices widen, more and more water gets through with gravity. You see this with hard assets, with liquidity. So in the past, for example, you see a major shift on the stock market, where your stock market collapses and everybody moves to gold or as a hedge, or hard assets like commercial real estate. And there's been a few times in the past that it's happened. But can you guys, the links are there why it's happening today. Can anybody give me examples of this, why it's happening? Of any of these categories? Can you raise your hand, give me an example? Ginger, I hear you saying something.
It didn't go like,
Yeah. Whether it's consumer debt, federal debt, global debt. I mean, this is creating a lot of havoc. All the wars going on. Yes, give me global debt. Thank you. Debt. Everywhere you look, and globally. Wars, sanctions, tariffs, all this stuff creating uncertainty. And just like that water, people are looking for stability. That's why you see gold going through the roof right now. And gold is not a recurring income stream like real estate. But you still see that massive shift when people are afraid and uncertain. I know Combs giving me that eye like, Nick, keep moving, buddy. So, all right, we're stuck here. It's frozen. Thank you. I can't operate a clicker. All right, so, we talked about debt. We talked about not just consumer debt, global debt, corporate debt, but, national debt, but also global. I mean, we're spending more than 3 times more globally as a world compared to what we bring in, right? We talked about, you guys are familiar with debt to income ratio. Basically, this is the same point. Our debt to income as a world, as in the entire world, is ridiculous right now. And so that's why you see this huge And if you include 26, this line would be even further up right now, this curve of people investing in gold. Wow, that's better. All right, so people are looking for stability. People are looking for cash flow. Scarcity, like gold, was the driver. Hey, Haley, I was talking about when you weren't here. All right, and so you want to look at for essentials. This is all that evidence that reasons why people are shifting to more essential assets, which I'm going to get into. And this happens throughout history, but these are the four major events that you can see in recent modern history, from the dot-com bust, and many of you remember the original Iran war crisis in the 70s. We saw it then, and we saw it in the 30s. When you have stagflation like we do now, which means reduced or limited growth in the economy, combined with massive debt, there's more likelihood of this kind of pattern happening. And that's exactly where we are today, folks, where we're seeing this. It's inevitable that you're going to see a currency, a capital rotation event because of the statistical data behind it. So this is not doom and gloom. This is reminding you all to get ready and be prepared and be excited as investors. All right, so I already talked about what wins, and these are the reasons why essentials win. Right? It's more stable. It's less available. Supply and demand issues. Who doesn't like cash flow? You're not going to get cash flow in an office tower right now, right? But you will in affordable housing, as an example, right? So, and this word was really important here. Markets may rise nominally, not in the casual sense of the definition. Nominally in the sense that, you might see your stock market, your stock increase. But what is that? How does that compare to your real buying power with that dollar? How much is the dollar dropping? So that's the hidden tax that we don't talk about much. But when your dollar buys less, it really doesn't matter that your stock value, your portfolio increased a bit if you can buy less with it, right? So that's very important. All right. The most important thing is, I was going to ask you, what's really the most essential and most compelling investment? And this is laying it out, right? You guys, it's no secret. You know that the affordability crisis is real. Housing prices have gone through the roof. This is more true than ever. It's always been more and more difficult for people to afford a home. But right now, especially you young folks, that it's become incredibly difficult. And so affordability leads to the demand for essential investments even more. And huh? We got an end. All right. So, forget the high rise office buildings. Forget the retails and shopping centers that weren't providing spaces for essentials, or even the stock market. You might see a massive shift downwards. You got to focus on essentials like housing. And that's why one of the reasons why many of us are here is we're in multifamily or manufactured housing, etc. So you're looking for stable cash flows. You want to focus on essentials and solve the problems of today. You can't just be investing in real estate in general. You got to be focused on what's solving problems. All right, and it's already obvious, I think, why housing leaks. And but here's the summary again. You've seen the resilience, particularly in manufactured housing, but all of these things, not to mention you're creating a positive impact, right, in the community. You're providing the American dream, you're providing cash flow, and etc. So in every cycle, capital rewards what is essential. It doesn't necessarily reward everything else, but the essentials always make it through. All right. And then when you're talking about essentials, the most essential in my opinion, surprise, surprise, is manufactured housing. Right, that's the most affordable version of the American dream, and so now that to me is the niche within the niche, so to speak. When you're talking about essential housing, this is the least expensive way to own a home, and solves problems for many residents, but also provides opportunities for investors. All right, people are noticing. Institutional investors are noticing. Everybody knows the secret, the cat's out of the bag, right? We represent almost 10% of the housing inventory nationwide. And, look at the numbers here. I mean, we're getting, our rents are typically 25, 30% lower than anywhere else. So, this is It's out. Everyone knows, and that's why people are paying attention. We're solving that crisis. All right, so again, every cycle rewards essentials, but MHCs are both scarce because there's not very much development going on in our space. So the demand is even more incredible, and that's why I would urge you to think about that. Wow, that could be a lot of noise back there. All right, so the numbers speak for themselves. You guys can get a copy of this deck by going to RISE360 Ventures and then reaching out to us. You can get a copy of the full deck. But the numbers for obviously speak for themselves. And, we can make money in any asset class, as I often say, within real estate. And our speakers tonight, I'm really looking forward to hearing them speak tonight. They're going to tell you how they did it in a great way. If you're interested in learning more about our asset class MHC, we've got a couple of stands out with a QR code that'll tell you about a project that we're going to make available in the next couple of weeks. We're taking passive investment, if you like, and beyond. So just scan the QR code if you'd like to know more about that. And I'm really looking forward to hearing Hayden and Daniel, Dustin speak tonight. So thank you very much.
I'm going from Texas. They flew out just to a presentation. Thank you very much. Momentum Multifamily, Dustin and Hayden.
Okay. All right. Yeah, appreciate everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Okay. Is this better? Okay, perfect. So yeah, Dustin Miles, live in Fort Worth, used to live in San Mateo actually. So, I worked at Lockheed Martin, worked down in Sunnyvale and all that is a while back. But, anyway, so happy to be back out here and I appreciate everybody's time. We run a meetup, as well. And so we're familiar with how all this goes and all that. So just want to give a shout out to Ollie and Calm and, Daniel and the team. So thank you guys. This is a great time. This is a lot of work to put this together. So really appreciate you guys. And anyways, we'll kind of dive in and go from there. Backgrounds in engineering. I've done a little over 350 million as far as assets, over 100 million in equity, and I've gone full cycle on 9 deals. Have another deal under contract to sell, so we should have another deal full cycle number 10. So really excited about that, and let's pass it over to you.
Yeah, and good to meet you guys. Hayden Harrington. I'm based in the Houston market, so I'm in Conroe on the north side of Houston. But got started in real estate when I was a teenager, doing single family flips and rentals with my dad, and wanted to work on the business rather than in the business, and just tried to figure out a way to get my foot in the door. Right, so came to events very similar to this through networking. Met Dustin back in 2018, and we formed a partnership. Like you said, we did meetups ourselves, and now we own, close to 2,000 doors together. So we're excited to be here with you guys and kind of show you the roadmap and the business plan that we not only did on this asset, but that's the same strategy we use on all our assets. So we'll get into it, and we'll kind of start showing you some backgrounds of where our portfolio is at, because this is a big part of our strategy. It's really easy to chase deals on paper, but it's a whole other thing to operate them. And so for us, we like to cluster assets. Multifamily, you're really in the people business at the end of the day. You're managing people along the way. So across these communities, we have about 50 employees that we're managing every day, every week. And life happens, right? People are out sick. We have a couple employees that are having surgeries. Like, life is going to happen, and you have to be able to fill those gaps when they do come up. Otherwise, you're exposing yourself to a lot of risk, right? And so that's our big strategy. Why we focus on clustering assets. This northeast side of town, I can hit all those assets in one day if I want to. So that's about a 25 minute radius right there. And these two are literally next door to each other. They share a fence.
So, we really wanted the H in Houston, H in Henry. That was, important to us. And like Hayden, we've kind of, we've developed a brand over the years. And so, one thing that we're really excited about is, we treat this like a franchise. We want everything run the exact same way, whether they go into, the Henry Liberty Hills, the Henry Rosenberg, the Henry Ranchstone that we're going to be talking about today. They get the same experience. They get the same, treatment, and it's really cool because we've had employees pursue us. They want to work for the Henry brand. We've had residents. They're like, "Hey, I'm moving to another part of town. Do you have another Henry in this location?" And so that's been big. And then another thing that we did more recently is we actually just put up a billboard because we have a cohesive brand, and it's not just random names and things like that. Because we have a cohesive brand, we can drive all of that traffic to one website. Depending upon where they live, they can choose the community that they're close to or want to live in. And so we're able to, and the only reason why we can do that is because we have a ton of assets. We're able to spread that cost. Otherwise, we honestly wouldn't be able to afford that just with one asset or two assets.
Another thing I want to bring up too is really it applies to multifamily, but every commercial asset. So I know a lot of you guys are doing different things, and the question we always ask ourselves is, can we do this at scale? If we can't do it at scale, we're not going to do it at all. And so, especially as you venture into commercial real estate, these are big assets. These are big deals. It takes a lot of people to take them down, to put them together, to manage them after the fact. And so, however we can reduce the risk and take the variables out of the equation to make sure that as we scale, we can maintain that franchise approach. That's always in our brain as we're looking for and acquiring different assets too. So.
Yeah, and we'll see. Yeah, there's some other benefits as well that we'll kind of talk about. But this we'll go through these slides a little quicker. But this is our first asset that we purchased in Houston, the Henry at Liberty Hills, and so it's cool because we basically were able to. We spent a lot of time on this. We basically set the template, and then it was copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. And so there's a lot of benefits to that. And the case study that we're going to go over saw the benefits of that. We're able to move very, very quickly. Our general contractor, our designer knows exactly what we want and what we expect. And they've worked together on tons of projects. And so we're able to move and execute at a very quick pace. We're not guessing, what color should this be or what should we name it? We have everything. We have the sign, we have the banner up. Write it, close. We're moving very, very quickly. Compared to other people that are like, okay, what are we going to do for this? This apartment. What colors work here? And so, anyways, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add here.
Yeah, I just noticed, and we can go to the next slide too, but you'll see like the paint scheme. I think that's a really good example. All these communities look very different, but we're using the same colors across the board. You'll notice this blue on the shutters. We do it on the entry doors, the patio doors too, and tied into our clubhouse. That's in the navy by Sherwin-Williams. So we have the same colors. Again, to Dustin's point, we're rinse and repeat. Very programmatic approach.
And then I want to mention the other thing that the part of this was all done on purpose. We were thinking about, if you're doing anything, you want to think about kind of the end in mind and what you want that to look like. And so we were like, what does it look like when we sell? And for the longevity of the asset, like we didn't want a lot of dark blue, out on the outside. That's going to fade. So we, obviously that was part of it. The other thing too is this is a nice neutral color. Lots of grays and kind of off whites and things like that. So when we go to sell, it's not like somebody's, oh my gosh, this looks terrible. I have to repaint. And so we want, obviously we, try to put meat on the bone for the next guy and all that, but we don't want it to be, I don't want to go after this deal because then I have to spend another $400,000 on paint.
Yeah, another thing there too, let's say their color scheme is green, right? Well, I could just change the navy to green and now it fits my brand, right? And I've spent a fraction of the cost to repaint the whole property. Additionally too, if you remember the map, those assets too, we're always thinking about that exit. You always got to keep that exit in mind when you're buying a property. And we can package these up as a portfolio and sell them to a large institution as an exit play. And the underwriting to understand each of these assets is very similar. The business plan that they're going to take and implement will be very similar as well. So the easier we can make it for our buyer to understand, the easier it's, going to be to sell it.
If you guys are remodeling them,
Do you have big trailers or like cargo containers that you put, you like buy the foot material in bulk and just store it on property?
It depends on the project. Yeah. So like if we're doing a roof, right, we'll have a container at the back of the property or something like that. A lot of times for interiors, we're not leasing down, which is a strategy to drive people out, drive your occupancy down, and then get in where you'd want to have your slabs in the parking lot and all that stuff. We don't do that. So for interiors, we're renovating on turns, so we don't need to do that. We're just ordering as we need and that sort of thing. But it kind of depends on the project. Sometimes a lot of these communities have detached or attached garages too. We can store materials in there if they're vacant. So there's a few different ways you can work around that.
Yep. So this is the asset we're going to be talking about in more in depth this evening. This one has since been painted here, so it looks very similar to all the others. And the other thing I want to point out too, like Hayden had mentioned on the first slide, where we have the assets share a fence line, and they're next door to each other. So if you look, that's our asset in the background as well. So we've got great neighbors, and we won't dive into this for a very long time. But part of what was attractive about buying the deals next to each other, because we didn't want to go in like, okay, we're competing against each other. That doesn't make sense. They actually have very, very different offerings. One of them has there's there's a tax abatement portion to it, and so there's some income restrictions and things like that. And then the other one's fully market, and one of them is much more upgraded than the other. So they have very different offerings. So no matter what traffic is coming to either property, we can send, if we don't have what type of product they're looking for, we can send it next door. So we're capturing all the traffic.
All right, so now getting into, this is the Henry Ranchstone. So some things that we loved about this property is we bought it from the owner that bought it from the developer. So they had owned it for 30 years. And obviously, if they've owned it for that long, they've liked that asset. If you're not having a good time with an asset and it's causing problems, you're gonna want to get rid of it, right? And so we love the fact that there was long-term consistent ownership. For one, whenever you have a lot of different new buyers come in, they all have their own ideas of how the property should look, the different finishes they want to implement. And so you have a half dozen different finishes on floors, on appliances, ceiling fans, all that stuff. And so making things uniform is really hard. But this owner had kept it consistent the entire time. When an appliance went out, they went back with that same exact appliance. And that helps when you're going to renovate tremendously. It was all untouched. So even when appliances went out, they didn't take a white appliance and put a stainless in, they put a white appliance in. So that actually really helps too, from our perspective, again, understanding the numbers, the underwriting, the finish outs, what we're going to do to it. And they took really good care of this asset too. So again, they owned it for a long time. They made it, they kept up with it. So it had little deferred maintenance. It's less than 3 miles south on Jones Road from another asset that we own. And the unit size, so it's 148 units, which is really on the smaller side that we like. We really want to be 150 and up because of staffing purposes. Your payroll numbers get really high when you're really sub 150, because on average you can afford about 1 per 75 units for an inside staff and an outside staff. So right at 150, you can really do 2 and 2. 2 inside, and then 2 maintenance staff. Anything under that, it gets hard, or your payroll numbers are going to get really high. So we really like the fact that we could leverage some scale in this submarket, because we had a 114 unit down the road, and so the payroll number up there was high, and so we're able to actually split the staff over the 2 and lower the payroll at both. So we like that strategy. It was a great vintage, 1993. It's in the northwest part of Houston, so Cypress, Jersey Village. You got great schools, you got a lot of growth going on out there. Apple and all those companies are starting to put facilities out there. So we really like that. And then it had a ton of character, and people don't think about that a lot, especially in apartments, but it really matters. So you can see it's got this like Spanish style steps on some of the units. It's got these beautiful bay windows. Some of the floor plans are almost like townhome style. Even the trim detail on some of the stucco here, it just had a lot of character, and as a result, it had a lot of long-term residents. So a lot of I'll pick on Alliance a little bit because they're building a product called Pros in Texas that's no balconies. It really doesn't have any character, and they have a hard time retaining residents. We're competing against one in one of our submarkets, and they're coming back to us now. But this property, there was actually a resident that lived here since it got built. So they lived here for 30 years. We saw them on the rent roll. They changed units once, but they've been at this unit for this property for 30 years. And there's a lot of residents here. We can go through our rent roll and see 15 years, 10 years. A lot of people have been here for a decade plus. And so when you have a sticky tenant base too, that's, that takes risks off the table. People want to live here. They want to stay. They want to plant roots. And we really love that about this deal. Yep.
I'll just kind of touch on a little bit more about this stuff. So it's zoned to Cy-Fair. Cy-Fair has great schools, great academics. One of the best ISDs within Houston. Houston is massive. About 7.5 million people ish or so. Generally, I think the growth. Anytime there's a growth, top jobs, top population. Houston is kind of in the mix there. And then, like Hayden had mentioned, we do have that other asset that's just down the road. So we're able to share economics. We're able to bring down the payroll of both assets, which helped quite a bit. And then, one thing I wanted to touch on that Hayden touched on just a little bit. So the fact that they've owned it for 30 years. So a lot of deals, especially in Texas, have traded every 3 to 5 years or so. If you guys were in any syndications the past 10, 15 years, we were selling deals every 2 or 3 years because you could double your money, and so why not, right? And so deals were trading. Well, every time you get into a new deal, you're typically spending CapEx money, you're injecting capital. If you're injecting capital and you're buying a new deal, you have to raise rents. These guys that own this property, they were mainly industrial guys. This was their last asset in Houston. They're not multifamily people. They've owned it for 30 years. It was cash flowing. They didn't have to, push on rents. And so there was a lot of meat on the bone with this particular asset because they were doing well. They didn't, they've owned it for 30 years. They were very comfortable. They didn't have to push. It was being well operated. The Google reviews are usually a pretty, just an insider secret, or not, but Google reviews are a pretty good indication of how things are being run. This was at a 4.3, so doing really, really well. North of a 4, most people are not going on to Google to say how much they love something. Usually it's the other way around. And so, and just a quick little note, all of our assets are 4.0 or above. We work very, very, very hard at that. I think if we add up, a lot of our assets will have 200 to 300 plus 5-star reviews, and that's part of our bonus structure with our managers too. So.
And so this is something else we look for. And this would be good to have the map of Houston, but we can get real granular on the different submarkets and areas. So these are all the submarkets in Houston. Obviously, there's a wide variety just in number and then also in rents too. You can see just the spread here. You've got all the way up to 2,000 plus average rents and all the way down to sub 1,000, right? And so we really like kind of that average, which is that dotted green line. We like to be at or above. Those are the submarkets that we generally like to be in. They're typically the suburban markets. So you've got Cypress, Katy, the Woodlands. Then you got some of the downtowns, but Spring, Friendswood, Rosenberg, Sugarland. Those are all the suburban markets around Houston. That's where all the jobs, all the population growth is happening. Specifically in Houston, I know the same thing has kind of happened in Dallas too, but that's really important for us is to look for good markets for the type of product that we have to offer. Not to say that you can't make money in some of these other submarkets, but our niche, we like to call it our swim lane, right, is suburban value-add multifamily built 1990s, primarily kind of in the mid 2000s, right? It's a very specific buy box that we're looking for, and it's typically in these kind of middle of the road markets that are very affordable for people, but still, offer really quality housing as well.
Yeah, and then it's not a surprise too if you kind of look at just kind of where rents are and all that. It's obviously that's tied to income for the area and stuff like that, and so that's really important for us. We want to make sure that the tenant base, the people that live around there can actually afford to live there and afford to pay rent, and it's just a good situation overall. We every single deal, there's this level of surprise isn't that big a huge deal, but just wanted to kind of show you things that as we're doing DD and things like that, these are things that we find, and so I think it's really important. We usually have a pretty large CapEx budget just for most of these deals, and then we have a good sized contingency budget too, because there's some things that we you can't see the chimneys, right? So it's not a huge change order. Our total budget, it's on one of the next slides. I can't remember
About
what
$3.5 million.
Yeah, so I mean our total budget was pretty large. So this is 0.01 or whatever percent. I can't do the math when 40 people are looking at me, but I'm trying to be funny. So but anyways, thank you. But this is something that we had to pivot a little bit, which is another thing, and then we found some plumbing issues, just mainly under the sinks that we've had to address on turns, and so we're addressing those on every turn. We're just replacing it, that way it's something that's not a lingering issue in the future. Our maintenance staff is not having to attend to that. Our thought is we inject capital, we make everything put it in a good spot, and that way the next buyer comes along, when we go to sell, we're handing them a really nice asset in good shape.
Yeah. Also, just in general with multifamily and commercial in general, right? These are large assets, so when typically something is unplanned, it's not just a one-time expense. Like we had, I think, 43 chimneys that we had to go and do that to, right? If you've got plumbing issues, that's 148 of those issues you're going to experience. So, we want to illustrate the point too, that if you don't have those contingencies, these expenses can add up very quickly. If you've got $1,000 plumbing expense in 148 units, doesn't sound like much if it's one. But if it's all 148, that's $148,000 you're about to have to spend. If you don't plan for that and have that just in case money, it can really be painful. And yeah, this is kind of the timeline. Like Dustin said, as we've gotten to do this business plan over and over and over, we've gotten faster at it, right? And especially with multifamily, the quicker you can raise rents or enhance the curb appeal and all those things, the quicker you can drive that NOI, which is how these properties are valued. So unlike single family, you're valued based on your comps. We're valued based on our NOI. So the quicker we can drive that, the quicker we can raise the value of that asset. And so just to illustrate, we actually bought this property it was at the end of July, and about 2.5 months later, we had already finished painting the entire outside of this property. A month later, we had completely done the roof as well. We wanted to do those two projects first because in multifamily, there's something known as leasing season, which is the summer. That's when everybody's moving around, right? And so you don't want to be renovating a clubhouse where all your traffic is going in the middle of leasing season. So we closed at the end of summer, and we wanted to make sure we can maximize the tail end of summer before we tackled that leasing season. Typically, the winter months are slower, so you have less expirations. If you think of like a bell curve, that's typically your lease expiration curve too. It peaks in the winter, in the summer months, and falls during the winter months. And so that's why over the winter months, we focused on that clubhouse. So we got the exterior curb appeal done during the summer. That's really what's going to drive people in. And then when less traffic started coming through the doors, we focused on that clubhouse so that it was ready for the next leasing season. And as they walk in the door, now it's a beautiful brand new clubhouse. So that exterior curb appeal brings you on into the interior as well. We had already started renovating units. We did a pickleball court, which is pretty fun because they had an old basketball court there and we converted. That was our first time doing one of those. So that was really fun. Again, in time for summer. And it was really cool. I think 2 weeks, a week or two after we had finished it, there was people already out there using it, you know, and it was a tired old basketball, volleyball court that nobody was using. So again, just seeing the potential that this asset had, and then getting to see the residents actually enjoy that was super rewarding. I think that's one of the best parts about this business in general. And then, so less than a year, we had already renovated 35 units, which is a pretty good percentage of this complex in general. And right now I think we're about 80 units into the renovation right now. So a little over halfway done with those.
Yes. Yeah. Let's see. So this was our T12 at takeover. So our income was about 2.2 million. Our NOI was 977,000. Our purchase price was 18.75 million at a 5.5 cap. And then a year later, we were able to push income about 12%. It's, if you guys are familiar with, just multifamily in general, I don't know as well out here, but in Texas, rents have been very flat. There's been a lot of concessions and things like that. So it's been, frankly, pretty challenging. And so the fact that we were able to eke out, 12% over a year, we felt really, really good about. I think it also just kind of, illustrates the fact that not that the seller was doing a bad job at all, but the fact that they just didn't have to mash their foot on the gas pedal. And so there was some just kind of natural upside because they were, they're industrial guys. That's where they make their money. That's where they focus on. And they just had this asset for 30 years and it was cash flowing. So why not? And so, if you look at the NOI, we're able to raise the NOI 49%. So if you just kind of, do quick math, obviously a lot of that's from the expense side, right? So, because it's, it's income minus expenses is your NOI. So on the expense side, there were, a handful of things that, we were able to, correct. And, one of them in particular, which, a lot of people don't think of is a value add, but in this particular instance, changing out the roof. So the roof was original, was, whatever, 2024 minus, 93 is, I can't think, but anyways, it's an old roof. And so, replacing that, we actually got a reduction in insurance cost of about $50,000. And so to put a value on that, you can go into your calculator and put 50,000 divided by 0.055, and I can't remember exactly what the number is, but it's a pretty significant value. And there were a lot of other just things on the expense side that I don't know if you want to touch on or not, but
yeah, like Dustin had mentioned earlier, these guys had owned this asset for a long time. I think they're based here in California too. Yeah. So they're operating it from afar. They're industrial guys. They're not multifamily. So they weren't maximizing and really optimizing their expenses. So typically on a stabilized multifamily deal, a good expense ratio is about 50%. If you're sub 50%, that's even better. But these guys were, I think, at like 58 to 60%. So there was a big delta on, they were just running way too much on the expense load. And so we came in, we were able to reduce the expenses, obviously drive the income too. And it's interesting. I think it's important to note, you might hear out there, we're not seeing a whole lot of rent growth. Well, there's a difference between rent growth and income growth, right? And that submarket is really going to tell you what the market rents are. So if you come into a submarket and the average market rent in that area is $1,400, but you find a community that's $1,200 effective, there's a delta there that you could move those rents to market, and you can still move the income even in an environment where you're not seeing market rent growth, right? And so that's really what we saw on this asset, what got us excited. And we had owned a deal right down the street too. So we understood what the market can support because we did renovations at that community as well. So we knew what kind of premiums we were getting. And we, got even more excited about this because there was even more meat on the bone than the other deals. So having that intimate market knowledge, seeing just the story. Did you have a question? No? Okay. And it just really got us excited about the overall opportunity. We like to think of these deals as a puzzle. So just because maybe you go in and maybe the cap rate, you'll hear your cap rate is low, right? Well, that only tells one part of the story, right? If they're not operating it low, it's not surprising that the cap rate's low, right? So what it could look like when you put all the pieces together is really what we're looking for. That story is super important. What they've been doing, what that submarket's doing, when you put all that together is really what makes the opportunity. And this has to add a number of those factors too.
Yep. So like I mentioned, insurance, and then payroll was another big thing. They were just kind of, like I said, they've owned it for a long time. Is a little bloated, and they were doing well and they're cash flowing, so they weren't incentivized to go push. And then one thing I wanted to, so we raised the value about 41%, which is within a year. That's really good within multifamily. But I wanted to mention too. So it's not just us telling you some numbers. Hey, we increased the value. We actually went back. I don't know if you guys know what a supplemental loan is. It's where you can go back to the lender and say, hey, we think we're doing really well. Here's our numbers. What do you think? And a supplemental loan is where they potentially loan you more dollars based on that. That's one benefit of an agency loan. And so we went back to them, and I think we could have pushed on a few things, but they were willing to give us another $1.4 million in loan proceeds because our NOI increased. I think we could have probably pushed in some areas and maybe got maybe closer to 2, but for us, we chose, we were debating whether to potentially do that or not. The reason why we did is we're like, we're cash flowing really well, right now. If we go take additional debt, then our cash flow is going to drop. And so, instead of taking on more debt, let's just, continue to push our cash flow, and then, look at raising distributions as we continue to raise NOI. Just from a risk perspective. So.
Okay. And we can give you a better look of, again, that opportunity that we saw. When we see this, we get really excited because we see the potential that it has, right? When you walk into the clubhouse, it had the beautiful bay window, it had the coffered ceilings, it had a lot of potential, but it was original. And, we weren't big fans of the royal blue there and some of the furniture and all that. But we saw the character of the property and just saw the potential that this could have when somebody put some money into it. So these guys hadn't put money into it in a long, long time. Again, our approach is a very programmatic, we call it like a franchise approach. So I like Chick-fil-A as an example because I think they do it really, really well. But when you walk into any Chick-fil-A, you get that same experience, right? That's the same sort of approach that we're bringing to apartments. We've had residents even where, they've lived at one of our properties, they're moving, they want to seek out other Henry properties, right? And so there's all sorts of additional benefits that come along with that approach. There's risks in it too, though, because you could get known for certain things and that could be good or bad, right? So, you got to really be honed in on your operations too. But for us, when we looked at making that decision, we were like, hey, we want that added pressure because we want that to really force us to bring our absolute best to the table every single day. So really after we can kind of see, so the colors are off, much more bright approach. Some interesting things here that I want to point out too is obviously we carried some of that blue into the clubhouse too. So that branding is super important to us. That's our signature color, right? Couple of important things is we use the same style flooring in our units. And so this is a 148 unit deal. We don't have a model here because when you're around that 100 to 150, every unit is 1% of your occupancy or close to it, right? And so we didn't want to we wanted to rent every unit that we possibly could here. So what we do is we have similar finishes and colors so that they can understand what it might be like to have their furniture in there without needing a model. So the countertops that we use in the kitchen there are the same ones that are in the unit. The appliances that are in that kitchen are the same ones that are in the unit. The flooring, the paint on the walls, all of that stuff is the same that they'll find inside that unit too. And then we take the same exact approach at all of our other communities too. So the flooring that we're putting in this clubhouse here is the same that we put in the 7 others that we have in Houston. So we can get better pricing with our general contractor on all of our materials. On this project, we actually locked in our cost for our renovations for 3 years, which is going to be the duration of the interior renovation. So we have a fixed cost, and we know, aside from a change order here and there, we know what our material cost is for the next 2 years as we finish this out. So you're able to negotiate with your vendors a little bit better and get better pricing, and that all translates to better ROI at the end of the day too. Here's the exterior. So, obviously it's very brick heavy and all that, but, it as you drive up, it didn't look bad by any means, but, we wanted to give it a fresh look. We wanted to, we want people, that's the first impression when they drive up is the first impression. And then the first impression of what their potential home could look like is the clubhouse. And so those two touch points are very, very, very important for us. We want everyone to be greeted. That first kind of touch point. A lot of people, honestly, I've really over the past, I guess, I don't know, 10 years or whatever, I really pay attention to customer service. And I remember I was walking into this, I love sweets, so I went into this cookie place, and before I had both feet in the door, she was already saying hi, welcome, and it's just, anyways, that's just, those first impressions are very, very important to us all around. So here's the after of the exterior. Their signage honestly was not that great. This signage looks awesome, really stands out. It's beautiful. They did a really good job at pickleball court. Really did a really great job just around the pool. Just in general, kind of brightened up these different columns and things like that. Just to give it a nice fresh look. His son's name is Henry. Yeah. And so we originally wanted H for Houston, D for Dallas. That's how we want the name to start with, the first letter of the city. And so that just worked out so perfect too. And it was just a great brand as well for a community. Yeah, he's 14 now. He's about as tall as me. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah, he's famous in Houston. yeah, we've had residents want to talk to Henry before. It also, that's a good point though. It's his son's name is on all these properties, right? Like we want that to have a good reputation. And so that's just another thing that drives us to make sure that we're giving that the best customer service that we possibly can, training our staff to greet everybody the same, treat them all the same, provide them with great quality living, and having a good why and reason behind it all is super important too. We'll look at the units. So again, when we see this, we get really excited. So anytime we see a deal that has all classic units in this shape, that's a good thing. We get super excited, especially when other properties in that submarket have been renovated. So if this is one of the last properties in the submarket to be renovated, we get really excited because there's demand. That's showing you there's demand for that higher tier finish, right? So this is kind of what it looked like. They had all sorts of different colors, and it just looks tired. It looks 30 years old, right? Go to the next. Again, you can kind of see some similarities from the clubhouse, right? The same style flooring, same appliances, same countertops, same paint schemes. And this is what we're doing at all of our Henry assets across Houston. So trends go every 5 to 7 years anyways. That kind of lines up with our business plans too. So every 5 to 7 years, we'll look at it and say, hey, for the next generation of upgrade, do we want to continue with this floors or do we want to change that? And then we'll roll with that for as the next trend goes. So you can really stick with things for quite a while. And then again, like I said, negotiate better costs with your vendors, and get a lot better deals. And then again, that speeds things up. And the time, every day that one unit is vacant in our market is about $50. And so you can tangibly quantify that every single day that unit sits vacant. And when you times that by, if you have 10 units vacant, that's $500 a day it's costing you for those units to sit. So if you can speed things up by a day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks, that's saving you thousands of dollars at the end of the day. So speed is super, super important in multifamily.
Oops, sorry.
That was wrong.
So there's kind of a few slides ago we showed, hey, these were an issue that came up and all that. One of them was, if you look at this slide, that's a really bright green. That's not something you want to stand out. So in our contractor's great, and so they changed it. That's probably not too different from their branding colors, kind of a brighter green. So anyways, got to a darker green. And then another thing I want to kind of point on is this. So we were it's the gym, we're wanting to put mirrors up and all that. And so we had an issue. So the wall was actually a little bowed. And so you have the mirrors up, and so a little kid could put their fingers, behind the mirror, could potentially, pull and things like that. So we're like, gosh, how do we mitigate that? We want to make sure everyone's safe and all that. And so put up this trim to, alleviate that potential issue. And, we have these are construction projects. There's always, issues and things that kind of pop up. And so you just, gather up and then you tackle them as you go. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to this, but.
Yeah, just on that too, liability is something you always got to think about. And if somebody gets hurt, you could be subject to a lawsuit. So you want to minimize those things as much as possible, right? And so there was, at some places on those mirrors, probably a 1/2-inch gap that a kid could easily slip his fingers behind, right? He's climbing on it, pulling it off the wall, mirror falls on him. Now he's got a cut and we're going to have a lawsuit, right? Yeah. So you got to think about those things and prepare against them. Some other things that just drive us crazy is like light bulbs that don't match colors. Paying attention to those little details is super important because it sends messages to those residents. Do I really want to live here if there's trash all over the ground? If at night half the lights are burnt out, right? That's not sending a good signal to those prospects, those potential future residents that, hey, if they're not keeping up with the grounds, how are they going to keep up with me? What if I have a work order that I need to put in and get fixed? Do I have the confidence based on the condition of the property that these guys are going to address it and take care of me and provide me with good housing at the end of the day? So, that tour path, that first impression, that even down to the uniforms, like it drives us crazy if they don't have their uniforms on. So we standardize that. We issue all of our staff members uniforms when they come on to one of our properties, and they have to represent the property. Otherwise, you never know. We've seen stories where, you have criminals impersonating maintenance men trying to get into people's apartments. That stuff happens and you have to prevent against that. So, uniforms, badges, all of that stuff is super, super important to not only protect your residents, but also send good signals to them that, hey, this is a good place to call home. And, we always tell our staff, we want to be the best in our submarkets. So when they're shopping us, they're shopping everybody else too. And we want them to choose us at the end of the day. Yep.
We've kind of touched on a lot of these things, but, we have a dedicated contractor, renovating all the units helps, but really, a lot of it's, what's the say? I always, you measure 3 times, cut once. And so just really, there's a lot of planning involved. thankfully we have a template. We've done it, multiple times. So a lot of it's, just plug and play, but really just trying to make sure everyone is in lockstep. Everyone is moving, and everybody knows, what the schedule is. Like Hayden mentioned, a lot of times when we're buying an asset, we really try to push the clubhouse to be kind of, we redo that over the holidays. Usually that's the slow time of the season. You don't want to do it during leasing season, which is, usually during the summer. And so just, really just trying to make sure that the timing is just kind of, everything's in lockstep. And then, obviously buying in bulk is huge. A lot of times we don't have I think we only have one asset that's in HOA. So usually that's not a huge thing that we have to pay attention to, but it's something to at least, know what you're kind of getting into as well. So, and then just, making sure, during, before DD and all that, just making sure, even though we're buying newer assets, sometimes, the assets we're buying are, 5 years old, not very old. But we're looking at plumbing, we're treating it, like, this is, I've done some C-class assets. That's kind of how I started. And so we treat we're looking at everything, looking at, the roofs, looking at the plumbing. Even though a lot of that stuff is pretty new, we just want to make sure exactly what we're getting into, and just make sure there's, as few surprises as possible. Yes, sir.
Is your renovation time period, are you doing like unit by unit, or are you clearing everybody out doing the whole building out? Tell us about how your time frames are in renovation.
Yeah, good question. So if you can hear, he's asking about how long it generally takes us to renovate, specifically the interiors of a property. Again, do we do a lease down strategy where we drive people out so we can get in? We don't do that. We like to stay well occupied even while we're renovating. So that's a big part of our strategy, is just stability. And so we're renovating as people are giving notice and moving out. We'll get into those units and renovate. Typically for an interior renovation, 3 years is the goal. A complex generally turns over 40 to 50% per year. So naturally, at a minimum, it's going to take you 2 years. But then you're always going to have stragglers. So that strategy does change at different points of the renovation. So the first year, it doesn't really matter quite as much. It's just, any unit that's giving us notice, we're getting into. But that year 2, we're really starting to think about, okay, some of these legacy units, people that are more tenured, right? They've lived there a long time. They're not going to be so willing to give their notice and go live somewhere else. So we have to implement strategies like transferring them. Year 2, we offer it. Year 3, we mandate it. So do what?
Transferring, I mean, you got your own.
Yeah, we can do that. We obviously most of the time they want to transfer within the community that they're in, but yeah, we can do that as well. But there comes a time in the renovation where you have to get in those units, so you will have to transfer people to some other unit. But
how long do you hold them?
We typically underwrite for about 5 years, but we say we're opportunistic to investors too. So like right now, it's not a great time to sell. So we're holding stuff right now, and then when the market gets a little better, we'll sell. But all of our business plans are 5-year holds. And then within that, like this community, we're renovating 100% of the entire community inside and out. So within about 3 years, we should be done with everything. All the exterior curb appeal, the amenities, the clubhouse, all that stuff's already done. Now it's just the units that are being renovated on turns. And then kind of going back to your original question too, some of the other strategies that you can implement in that year 2, we're in that year 2 of interior renovations. So on our renewals, we increase the rates a lot. And so they can either take that, and that's great for us to maximize that second year because we'll have a higher rent that they're paying. But that's naturally going to force more people to give their notice because they don't want to pay that rent. So that gives us access to that unit. So it's kind of a benefit either way for us. To be able to get access in a unit or to maximize the revenue of the community. And then again, year 3, we have to relocate them either within the community or they may go find somewhere else to live. Good question.
Here,
Yeah.
what was the occupancy rate before and after? And then you have done maybe rentability analysis before trying all of this?
Yeah, it's a good question. The question is, what was the occupancy when we took over, and then what is it now? So the occupancy really didn't change that much. It was hovering around 90, 91%, and we're about 92, 93 today. So that didn't change too much. Again, that's part of the strategy that we look for. We're not looking for super distressed deals or anything like that, something that's 60, 70% occupied. We're looking for good, stabilized communities. Again, we're looking for de-risking the deal any way we can, and stability is a big part of that. So if we see stability at the asset, we like that. That's attracted to us. And then what was the second part of your question?
Did you guys do any profitability analysis for all of the renovations?
Yeah. So like I said, so we have a general idea of the sort of premium that we're going to be able to get based on the renovations that we're going to come in and do. So we bake all that into our underwriting. Talking with our management company, and then also just looking at our portfolio helps too. Like I said, the Henrietta Jones Road went through the same renovation right down the street, almost in the same submarket. And so we had a good idea of what the area could support already walking into this community. If you don't have that data or that experience in that market, go to a property management company. Ask them what they're getting.
Investors have proved that before getting that. I mean, did you have to have it completed by investors?
No, not by investors. I mean, we showed them an offering deck, and if they wanted to invest in the project, they could from there. Another way to kind of look at is their proof of concept of what we're trying to accomplish here is look at the comps. So if your comps you've got classic units here, and all your comps in that submarket are renovated, and they're having $150 to $200 rents than where we are, that tells you that market can support it. Now, if they're running 8 weeks free and their rents are a lot lower, or they're advertising a rents that are in line with your classic rents, that means you're going to get $0 for your renovation, and it's not going to make sense. So a lot of that's happening right now. So you got to be really careful. You don't want to assume you're going to get a $150 premium and walk into a submarket that you're having negative trade outs. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, you're very detail oriented, very thorough, very good.
Thank you.
Very impressive. So now they have to.
Yeah, we did. We actually did 2 capital calls. One deal we did a capital call. Both of them, like, the deals were running fine and all that, but it's called a tax abatement. So it's so property taxes are high in Texas. We don't have income tax, but everyone's going to get paid. That's just how it works. So, so we did a tax abatement. So our property taxes were wiped out. And so that increased once, our NOI went up from that, and then the value went up. And so we were able to refinance and all that. One of the capital calls that we did, we raised the value. It was our smallest property. Is actually the one that's closest to this one. We raised the value about $4 million from that tax abatement. The tax abatement was about $1 million. And so that's where the capital call dollars came from. The GPs, including Momentum, also loaned money to get it over the finish line. And then the other deal, we also did a tax abatement. We raised the value $12 million. It's a larger deal, bigger tax load, and that's why the value went up more. And so on the first one I mentioned that's closest to this one, we actually paid back the capital call plus 15%. So, and we were able to refinance both deals into fixed rate debt. And so that's kind of what both of them looked like. So yeah, it was a lot of work.
It could honestly be a whole nother case study to talk about because that's been the struggle, right? Values drop because of interest rates 20 to 30%. And so making up that delta, people can't refi right now. That's the struggle. So they're forced to sell. And a lot of times they have to do capital calls, but the capital calls are so big to refinance that debt that they can't do it. And so they're forced to sell, and then the investors are getting wiped out. So our strategy was really a 2-step into that refi by first partnering with a local housing authority, getting that tax abatement, and that allowed us to refi and not only preserve the equity, but actually increase the value of the properties along the way too. So we've repositioned our pretty much our whole portfolio out of floating rate debt with that strategy.
Yep. Good question. I mean, honestly, like, just to be super, whatever, if you bought a deal in 21, 22, you had some issues. And so just frankly, you had to figure out what to do. And so that's fortunately we had that path available. We started that in December of 23. Yeah, we started that, almost 3 years ago now. And we just completed all the refis kind of earlier this year. So yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah. So kind of on this note, kind of like I was talking about how you measure 3 times, cut once. So here we just want to make sure that we're in lockstep with our general contractor. We have paint colors here, and just trying to make sure everything is exactly done the same way. The great thing is that this is I can't remember if this was 6 or 7. Anyways, we've done it a number of times, and so obviously that made it a whole lot easier. And we're using the same color, same materials over and over and over. But I think we try to try to make everything as seamless as possible, just to make sure there's no room for error. And trying to move as fast as possible.
Yeah, and I know a lot of you guys are real estate investors, and it's almost like the game of telephone, right? And if you're playing it from afar or you're managing it from afar, that's really what's happening. It gets lost in translation along the way, and then you show up and the project isn't at all what you expected it to be, and then you got to redo it all, right? So the more detailed you can be, again, the closer in communication you are with your general contractor who's actually on the ground doing that work.
Yep.
This is something super simple, but it gets overlooked so many times, especially in apartments. It's just your digital footprint at the end of the day. Do you have professional photos? Do you have a nice looking website? What are your Google reviews? On your floor plans, I see so often they don't even have pictures of their floor plans. And it's like, I don't know what the layout's going to look like. How am I going to lease this unit, right? We see a lot of traffic that actually leases units without actually coming and touring. So this is super important. You're going to get traffic from this and actually secure leases based on your web presence too. Even down to, thinking through the layouts of the photos that you're displaying too. We had an asset manager that used to work for us. He used to work for Camden, who's a big national operator, and they spent a ton of time researching what people actually care about. And obviously it's your high touch areas like your kitchens and baths, and then the common areas, and then the properties last. A lot of people do the opposite, but people actually care about the space they're going to be in, right? So laying out your photos when you go to the community, that's the order of the photos are those kind of high touch, really key areas that appeal to residents. So thinking through stuff like that is super important too, but this really doesn't cost that much in general. I think a professional photo shoot probably costs $200. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the web presence stuff is just having that, you're looking at, going on your website, looking at it, making tweaks with your team if there has to be any. Say, hey, these are out of order, this doesn't look right, this is the wrong community, all of that stuff. We're missing a floor plan, right? Making sure that stuff is the way you want it, because this is what residents are looking at the end of the day, and it goes a long ways.
Yeah, and to our point earlier, like if you have this, that's great, but if you drive up to the property and there's trash there, or if you drive, if you go into the office and it smells funky, like all of this is for nothing. And you've completely, you've lost that, potential tenant. So it's not only, this is the first step, and then when you drive up, another one, and then clubhouse is another. And then one thing that you have to think about too, the tour path to the unit, to that model is super, super important. If, they walk by and there's, dog stuff over there, and there's, someone doing whatever over here, that's, and obviously very unattractive. I wouldn't want to live there. So, anyways, it's not just you can do this, but if you don't have the other steps in place, it's all for naught.
What makes the difference? Yeah. Oh, this like Dustin said, Google reviews are super important to us, but the point we wanted to illustrate too here is you're not going to please everybody. So we actually got this review. They were not so happy with all of the improvements that we're actually bringing to the property because they didn't like the banging on the roof and stuff like that. But this is to illustrate just, again, no matter what you do, you can't please everybody. So at the end of the day, you can't, you can't get your feelings hurt or anything like that if something like this happens. It's just you got to do something about it, right? We wanted to communicate to the residents. Obviously we saw this, we weren't happy with it, but want to communicate. We're doing this for your benefit. We want to improve this asset, raise the quality of the tenant base, give them more things to enjoy while they live here, right? But you're still going to get some people that aren't happy with it. So you can't take it too personally. And you really got to focus on the majority. What is the majority of the community saying? Like Dustin said, most of our communities have hundreds of good reviews, and every now and then you're going to get somebody who's a little sour. But it's just kind of part of it. You got to do what the majority is looking for and where that demand is. And also too, there's always two sides to every story. So what we've learned too, it's easy to see a negative review and attack your team, but you don't know the full story. So you got to hear both sides too. I know I've seen bad Google reviews and immediately got after our team, and I've regretted that in some cases, right? Because there's, again, two sides to every story, and a lot of times it's somewhere in between. So it's just something to consider as not only renovating, but also managing, apartment or, mobile home parks, anything that, you're dealing with people at the end of the day. Yes, ma'am.
Most consumers get AC all 5-star reviews, like 100 5-star reviews. They figure it's a shock.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right.
It's like 100. Like I haven't. Right? Yeah,
That's true. Yeah.
That's because people are doctoring reviews. It's not if you got 10, 20, that's not. But you have like 100, and they're all 5 stars, and like, all right, some.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there's both ends of the spectrum, right? We use, just in general, how we use reviews and our touch points as, how we use it as a bonus tool and all of that. So we use it at those high touch points, right after they tour, right after they move in, and then right after a work order has been completed. Not only because that's when they're interacting with our staff, but it also puts pressure on our staff to give that good customer service, because we'll see it. We'll see the quality of their work, because it'll end up on Google, right? And so putting that pressure on the team also holds them accountable along the way too.
And I mean, we're meeting with our teams each and every week, and so if we see a review that's not so hot, we're like, hey, what's going on? Like Hayden mentioned, it's not assuming our staff's in the wrong or whatever. It's just trying to understand the issue. How can we correct it? We want, it's big. I know we have to wrap up here in a minute, but it's kind of a yellow flag for us if the manager, everything's rosy and blah blah blah. I mean, we're in the, like we mentioned a few times, we're in the people business. Stuff happens. There's always, I mean, we have a lot of people in a small area, and it is what it is. And so when the manager's painting this rosy picture, we're like, okay, come on, give it to us. We've seen it all. So yes, sir.
Look, you guys are doing an amazing job. You're very detailed. You're using investment. What is your investment summary or your offering? And how much capital are you looking for in capital? I mean, you sold about 500 times.
Well, I appreciate that. This deal closed about 18 months or so ago. We do have a deal in Dallas. We're not here to pitch that, but if you do want to get on our list, you can let us know. We're trying to pick up the pace. We've averaged about 2 deals a year, very similar. Obviously, you've seen our portfolio, so that's our focus. Every quarter or so, we're trying to have a new offering for investors, and this is kind of the stuff that we're going after. We got a 2015 deal. It's a hot assumption in North Dallas right now. We know the seller, he's distressed, having to liquidate his old portfolio, so it's one of those situations. But it's got a great loan on it, and we're excited about it.
Average investment, average return.
I'd say our average investment is, about 85K across our investor base. Again, I know we were chatting a little bit earlier, but we typically have a $50,000 minimum and then a $150,000 minimum. You get a little better returns for a little bigger check. Yeah. And then we do prefer to either a 7 pref or an 8 pref with a 70-30 or 80-20 split. We've done that same structure on all these deals too. So yeah.
Yeah, and then I know we gotta kind of wrap it up and all that. So, Colin's giving me the eye there. So, yeah, we'll just big into training our teams, communication with our teams. We have this is their website, so they go to goals and bonuses, delinquency breakdown. They have to fill out what's called a WMR each and every week, weekly management report. It's really just really important to just keep, this is a business. We have to operate it. And in each deal is its own separate business. So,
yeah, we'll go super quick. But in general, supply peaked in 24. And so because of the Fed hiked interest rates since then, developers haven't been able to build. So that's part of the opportunity that we're starting to see. Supply is falling off a cliff. And then on top of that, we're seeing, people in distressed situations. Those are the sorts of opportunities that we're starting to get excited about. A lot of the headwinds we faced over the last few years, like rising costs on your insurance and taxes and some of that, they're starting to come back in again. On that deal specifically, the new deal that we have in Dallas, we're going to cut the insurance in half. So, there's a value add just from controllable expenses at the end of the day too. So we're starting to see some of those headwinds shift to tailwinds. And we think over the next few years, as supply dries up and really gets leased up from when it peaked, that'll drive rents and occupancies over the next few years. So that's kind of where we're at. Yeah.
Appreciate everybody. Thank you very much for having us.